If it came to a shooting war in America or any place around the world, who would fight? And why would they fight? I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
Today's program is going to be one of those shows that some people say, ooh, it's so radical. And really it's not. But what I'm doing is connecting the dots between the historical stories that we love or the biblical stories that we love and you. Just connecting the dots between history, biblical theology, and you and me. So I asked the question at the beginning of the program, if a shooting war started in America or other places in the world, who'd be shooting, who'd be fighting? I remember being in a meeting where somebody was talking about freedom and being willing to die for freedom. And the thought hit me like a ton of bricks. That is a question. But there's another question, and that is, who would be willing to kill for freedom? To aim a gun at a fellow human being or whatever weapon they had at their disposal, and to dispatch a fellow human being made in the image of God, dispatch them to the next life so that that person could be free. Not the one who's dead, but the person doing the shooting. We are reading stories about the Revolutionary War right now, focusing on Boston. And there's something fun and romantic about it for a little boy, okay? But they don't get it. We watched a movie the other night called The Fighting Sullivans. Perhaps you've seen it. I've never seen the movie before. I'd heard about it years ago. I know I'm a movie buff. I love watching movies. Never seen the movie. I was crying my eyes out at the end. And my sons thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I was viewing it as a dad, that poor dad and mom losing all of their sons. And they were viewing it as a band of brothers willing to fight and to die with each other. So they're at that stage in their lives where Bunker Hill, the siege of Boston, going up to Ticonderoga to steal the cannons and bringing them back, General Knox doing this, or Colonel Knox at the time, these are the stories that fire the heart of a young boy or a young girl. But the reality of it is that they'd be firing weapons at fellow human beings. My wife and I were talking. Now I'm having this discussion with you so that you might do some soul searching, because I'm doing soul searching and you might as well join me. The American Revolution was fought for a good number of reasons, but the primary reason was that the colonists said, we are not going to submit to the dictates of Parliament when we don't have representation in Parliament. So, for example, the Boston Tea Party was over a 1% tax on tea, but the British authorities had structured it in such a way that the tea was actually going to be less. Tea with tax was less money than the tea without tax. And the colonists said, no, we don't have any representation. So if you can vote a 1% tax on tea, okay, just this one item, why can't it be a 50% tax on all of our items? In other words, they were committed to the principle. They understood it. They could articulate it. They were willing to risk their lives for it, and they were willing to kill for it. Now, let me ask you a really troubling question. How many people in our country today do you think could, number one, articulate what the American Revolution was fought over? And number two, how many people do you think in the country today would fight in a shooting war? to restore our liberties? I fear there's not many. I really do. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much the human soul can take in. And in those days, the number one read book in the world was the Bible. The number two read book in America was the Lives of Plutarch, or Plutarch's Lives, as some people call it. In other words, they were studying heroes of Rome. Now we have Beyonce, and we have Miley Cyrus, and we have rappers, and we have rock and rollers, and we have our sports teams, and we have our sports announcers, and we have Dancing with the Stars, and we have America's Got Talent and American Idol. We're just inundated with cultural drivel, things that sate us, fill us, and then deplete us at the same time, dissipate us, so that there's just so few people that would be willing to fight for freedom, for what's right. Forget a 1% tax. I mean, really and truly, how many people in America do you think today would fight over a 1% tax? Look at how much we're taxed already. It's just not there. Now, obviously, the difference is that they were fighting over being taxed without representation. We're being taxed to death with representation. But the point still remains. And by the way, does the fact that an election took place mean that you can't fight? And what did that pastor mean recently when he said we're approaching a Bonhoeffer moment? I'll be right back.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah.
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
A Bonhoeffer moment. Recently, a preacher from the Southern Baptist Convention, I believe the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, gave a pretty fiery sermon regarding so-called same-gender marriage and said, no, we will defy you. And he said, we may be approaching a Bonhoeffer moment. I did not read the text of the entire sermon, so I don't know the context of that statement. But certainly a Bonhoeffer moment would mean, and that's code language for a moment of civil disobedience, of defying the government. For those of you who don't know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran pastor in Germany who was charismatic. I don't know if you knew that. He came to America and got involved with some Holy Ghost Pentecostal type people and had a real encounter with Christ, and was a brilliant theologian as well. And decided, he was in safety in America, and he decided that he had to return to try and fight for what was right in Germany. And he was involved in an assassination plot against Hitler. He was arrested and was, if my memory is correct, 9 days before his concentration camp was liberated, that he was ordered executed by Goebbels himself. It might have been Himmler, but I think it was Goebbels who ordered him executed 9 days before the camp was liberated. Very close. It might have been even less time than that. This is horrifying. So he was involved in an assassination plot against Hitler. And this American preacher said, maybe this is a Bonhoeffer moment. I doubt very much that he was talking about that level of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's commitment. But that aside for a minute, I can hear people in my brain. I hear the voices of people saying, Germany has a legitimately elected government. They have a legitimately elected government. Hitler won the election. I think it was 33. And then the Reichstag voted him dictatorial powers. Let the weight of that impact you, okay? Hitler won an election, his party took control of the Reichstag, and then the Reichstag voted to give him, the elected representatives of the people of Germany, voted to give him dictatorial powers. And they, one by one, they passed these various laws that were oppressive, that were tyrannical, that were murderous, right? It was all legal, and it originated from the democratic process. And what did we do? Well, two things. We fought a war, yes, a war, and more importantly, we tried them as criminals. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me? The German government was elected. It was a democratic process. They passed laws. They oppressed the innocent. Law gave them the right to kill innocent people. And then after the war, not only did we fight a war against people like that, but after the war, we tried their leaders for things that they did that were legal and that came to pass in a democratically elected government. Now just stop. Let the weight of that sink in on you. We have a democratically elected government. We have judges who have made it a legal act to murder innocent people. I weary at times of people comparing the American Holocaust of babies with the German Holocaust of Jews. And the reason I weary of it is not because the ethical comparison is not accurate. It is accurate. In some ways, the abortion Holocaust is worse. Some people, I'm going to go on this rabbit trail because it's a good one for you, all right? Some people will say it's obscene to compare the German Holocaust against the Jews with the American Holocaust against babies. Because the Jews were born and they had lives, and they say these things. And there is something to that, to see a mother and a daughter and them wrenched apart and then the mother killed. It's horrific. But the Jews at least had the opportunity to flee, which some of them did, to plead for mercy, which some of them got, to hide, which some of them did, to fight back, which some of them did, okay? They had these options at their disposal. What does a baby have? What does a baby in his or her mother's womb have? The maternal womb, the womb of a mother, it should be the safest place in the world for a baby. But instead, it's become a shooting gallery. A baby can't run. A baby can't plead for mercy. A baby can't hide. A baby can't take up arms and defend itself. So in some ways, the American Holocaust is worse. Worse. Because we've set our sights on a victim that is completely, totally helpless and should be the prize, the joy of the human family. Another life is coming into the world. Another life is inside of that woman right now and will soon be with us. Instead, we're killing them and throwing them out. So when I come back from this break, we'll continue on with the other discussion that we were having about democratically elected government murdering people and then us trying those criminals at Nuremberg and our own criminals. I'll be right back. Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. we will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today. I promised you when this show began that I would be labeled as a radical by some people. And I know that some people think, oh, I can't believe you're talking about this. Listen, we're in danger as a country, okay? And somebody, and thank God there's more than me, but we have to connect the dots from our own beloved stories during the revolution, the ethics of the revolution, the ethics of the use of force, the ethics of trying people as criminals for deeds that they committed that were legal at the time, the Bible, all the biblical ethics involving these things, the times in the scriptures where war happened, where God said, go and kill these people, all this stuff. We have to discuss it. We have to, people, okay? It's our right and it's our duty. Now, as I mentioned to you, we tried people at Nuremberg for crimes that they committed that were legal, they were under the color of law in their own country at the time that those acts were committed. And the acts were committed by people that were in power, elected democratically. Okay? One of the crimes that we tried people for in Nuremberg, this is a forgotten fact of history, but it's true nonetheless. We tried people for abortion. Yeah. The Allied victors tried people at the court in Nuremberg for abortion. It was committed under the color of law. And we said no. The concept of the Allies when they won, here was the dilemma that they were in. I'll explain it to you. The dilemma was this: do individual human rights supersede the right of a state, a sovereign state, to do what it wants internally? Most of foreign policy for hundreds of years, since the Treaty of Westphalia, most foreign policy has been to allow nations to do what they want internally. We won't mess with you. When you spill out of your borders and do things, that's when we are going to hold you accountable and make war against you. But that has been changing in recent years because of what happened, say, in Rwanda, when everyone stood by, did nothing. And so you start to see people intervening, different nations intervening into the internal affairs of other nations when human life is at stake. And this problem, this ethical conundrum and political conundrum surfaced at Nuremberg after the war because they said, well, look, our whole foreign policy is based on the fact that nations can do what they want, and we only intervene when they're going to try and harm us. And then they said, no, we cannot have a world in which a tyrant can, under the color of law, oppress and kill people. Those human beings have rights before their maker that the international community must be called upon to enforce. Okay? So here we are in America today, 2015. How many millions of babies have been murdered? It's mind-boggling. How much blood is crying from the ground right now? It's mind-boggling. And these babies have been brutally murdered under the color of law, just like Jews and others were being murdered and imprisoned in Nazi Germany, for which we tried them. Will the day come? Will the day come? Should the day come? Never mind will it, should it come? When abortionists are put on trial using the legal principles of Nuremberg, the Nuremberg trials, the trials after World War II, trials in which we participated with prosecutors, with judges. Will there come a day when abortionists are tried under the principles of Nuremberg? Will there come a day when some of our elected officials are tried? Will there come a day when some of our judges are tried as criminals for their acts of violence and murder. I don't know if it'll happen. Should it happen? I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years. And sadly, we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy. Why does a nice guy like me keep getting thrown in jail? I have been arrested almost 50 times and spent over a year of my life locked up in various prison facilities. And I wrote a book, many books. In fact, one of them is called Why Does a Nice Guy Like Me Keep Getting Thrown in Jail? It's a theological work, answering those who say that the church should not be involved in politics or that we should retreat. I encourage you to get it. In fact, get one and give it to your pastor. Some people might ask me, Randall, why are you discussing this? This is so intense. I'm going to tell you why. Fear. Part of it is fear. I'm afraid of two things. One, I am afraid that it's going to come to violence, a shooting. I don't know how, when, where, but I'm afraid that it's coming to that, or that it will come to that. I'm afraid it will. I pray it doesn't. The second thing I'm afraid of is that there's not enough people who think right if the time comes to that. I was explaining this to some people the other day, those who are saying that, well, our Second Amendment is to oppose the government. I said, look, this is not an even playing field anymore, okay? Speed of travel, ability to spy, communications, the sheer size of the armaments and the number of people on the payroll who are involved in law enforcement, or any number of areas that involve the ability to pick up firearms against civilians. The American people would be in rough shape. So I fear that it could happen, and I fear that if it needed to happen, there's not enough people that are ready or even get it. Let me kind of bring this around on a political level. The reason I am so involved in politics, and the reason I urge you to be involved in politics, is because I'm a Christian. It's because Jesus Christ is the King of Kings. He is the lawgiver of the universe. Politics is Christ's realm, all right? He has a legitimate, read Psalm 2, read Psalm 110. I'm not going to take the time to go over them now, but you read them for yourself. The church has always held that Jesus Christ has supreme authority in the affairs of this world, including the governments of men. That's why I'm so preoccupied with it. And another reason is because of all the four governments that God established, self-government, family government, civil government, and church government, the one that can do the most damage to us and our families, our churches, our individuals, is the civil government. Because God authorized them at the get-go, from in Romans 13, to have the sword, and even prior to that. So they can wreak the most havoc. And historically, as you look over the sweep of history of the human race, it has been tyrants with weapons that have done the most damage to the human race. The end. The end. Thank God when weaponry got into the hands of righteous people and they could overthrow the tyrants. That's why I'm so nervous. And the other reason I'm nervous and I'm talking about these things is because the field of candidates at every level is, with a few exceptions, is so abysmal. And people are so committed to bread and circuses that I hear people compare Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton and say that they would vote for Clinton. And I'm thinking, Donald Trump, I haven't figured the guy out yet, but I've figured out Hillary. And if you're saying to me that you would vote for Hillary, there's something wrong with your ethical train, your ethical brain, your ethics. Something's wrong.
you.